Hello book lovers, welcome to Uncommon Reader. I'm Daniela and welcome to Tag Tuesday. So after so many booktuber related tags like the bio tag and behind the scenes tag, I figure you could use a change. And how appropriate when I chose this tag last weekend. This tag was created by Mark at Book Time with Elvis, and I was tagged by Kevin Tolles Reads, and thank you so much. Mark did this sort of started this conversation thread tag a couple of months ago, probably. And after seeing a press conference between Donald Trump and Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, he got this uneasy feeling, and it gave him the idea of preparing for the apocalypse, and he chose 12 books to save for the future generations, hopefully, or for aliens coming to the rescue. I don't know. But anyway, I thought this was just like appropriate for it. And I picked my books during the weekend, and here I am right now. So it's me again, Daniela from the future. Unfortunately, I've missed a very important piece of information about this book tag, as Mark had set a couple of parameters to choose books. The first one being, choose books that you have read since being on BookTube. And the second one being, do not choose books in volumes or in a series. Okay, let's move on. So I'm going to look down at my notes because talking about 12 books is a lot. So I try to be concise in the reasons I gave for choosing these books. So I will look down. I don't want this video to last an hour and just randomly talk about it. So I also picked books that have touched me deeply, both mentally and emotionally. And they also represent my interest in exploring different cultures and different worlds. So let's start with reading Lolita in Tehran. So I mentioned this book in my last video, actually, from my favorite author, Azar Nafizi, who has become one of the most important authors in my life. If you want to approach this incredibly sensitive author's work, I think reading Lolita in Tehran is where you should start with. She recounts her years spent as a literary professor at the University of Tehran during the Islamic Revolution, when moral laws were established with dramatic changes for women and society. It's also a beautiful homage to literature and banned books. I actually ask you to refer to my recent video to hear more about this book, as otherwise I would go on forever and ever. We stay in Iran with the second book, The House of the Mosque by Kader Abdollah. This book got me from page one. It's an historical novel spanning the decades before and during the 1979 Islamic Revolution. It follows the story of a prominent family living in a large house attached to a mosque in a fictional city. The family, headed by Aga Jan, represents traditional Iranian society. Over time, the family becomes entangled in the political and religious changes sweeping the country, and the novel portrays how the rise of political Islam, Western influences, revolutionary moments deeply impact the personal lives and the relationships and long-held traditions. So I've chosen this book because I'm also deeply fascinated by what was once Persia, and especially love the character of Aga Jan, and its moderate and thoughtful personality. It was definitely the moral compass of the whole book. So here's the classic, David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. So I haven't read many classics since my arrival on YouTube, and I'm counting also my years when I started my Italian channel. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to come up with 12, worthy titles for this book tag after only a year and a half of life here on Uncommon Reader. But how I enjoy this book. I guess there is no need to talk much about the story, as it's one of Dickens' most famous books. Dickens to me is the exception to the rule. And what I mean with that is that I don't usually like books that are too descriptive and dwell too much in details and are too verbose. So, well, Dickens knows how to entertain, and he's the master of humor and sophistication, and knows how to dose drama with wit. So you really don't stay sad for too long, and also enjoy all those verbose pages as well. And talk about wit and sophistication, here's the Charles Dickens of the 21st century, Amour Tolls. I chose A Gentleman in Moscow. That was such a mesmerizing journey for me, reading this historical novel. It's set in Russia, beginning in 1922. It follows Count Alexander Rostov, an aristocrat sentenced by a Bolshevik tribunal to house arrest in the Grand Metropole Hotel in Moscow for writing a supposedly subversive poem. Though confined to the hotel for decades, Rostov creates a rich and meaningful life within its walls. He forms deep friendships with staff and guests, mentors a young girl, and finds purpose in unexpected ways. Through his wit, charm, and resilience, he adapts to a changing world while holding on to his principle. So this novel is a warm, elegant meditation on time, history, and personal dignity in the face of political upheaval. Talk about that right now, right? Okay, here's the only Italian book that I've chosen, and it is History by Elsa Morante. History is a sweeping and tragic novel that explores the devastating impact of World War II and its aftermath on ordinary people in Rome, especially the poor and the marginalized. The story follows Ida, a shy widow, half-Jewish school teacher, and her two sons, Nino, who's a rebellious teenager, and Giuseppe, a gentle, innocent child born from Ida's rape by a German soldier. As fascism, war, and poverty take their toll on Italy, the family faces immense suffering. Morante blends fiction narrative with real historical events. And through bombings, persecutions, hunger, and loss, the novel documents not only their personal tragedies, but also the broader collapse of humanity in wartime. And through these titles, actually, by following my channel, you probably have seen how the theme of war and injustice keeps recurring in my reads. And in fact, there are two more titles that relate to this theme in my list. And the next book I chose is V13 by Emmanuel Carrère. It's a non-fictional and the only non-fiction book that I've included in this list. It's an account of the trial of November 13, 2015, of the terrorist attacks in Paris, which killed 130 people and injured hundreds at the Bataclan concert hall, restaurants, bistros, and the state of France. The title V13 refers to Vendredi 13, which is Friday in French, the date of the attacks. Carrère, a celebrated French writer, journalist, and intellectual, attended the historic months-long trial of the surviving attackers and accomplices. In his characteristically clear and empathetic prose, he recounts the testimonies of survivors, the grief of victims' families, the explanations from the accused, and the legal complexities of such a massive case. I found he covered this trial in a 360-degree spectrum really effectively. The book isn't just a courtroom chronicle, it's a meditation on justice, trauma, memory, and humanity. Carrère explores how a society tries to process unimaginable violence and how individuals on both sides, which is really important in my book, try to live with what happened. V13 is powerful, restrained, and deeply moving, offering a close-up view on one of the most painful chapters in recent French history. and this is the first book I read from Carrère, and I appreciated this work so much that I started collecting and reading his previous works. He's now one of my favorite authors. Okay, here's the last book relating to wars, Mornings in Jenin or Jenin by Suzanne Abdulhawa. This book is deeply emotional and politically charged novel that tells the story of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict through the lens of one family's experiences. The novel follows a family beginning in a peaceful village in Palestine, which they were forced to flee during the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. They end up in the Jenin refugee camp, where their lives are marked by displacement, loss, and violence. The central character, Amal, grows up in a camp and later moves to the United States, trying to reconcile her personal identity with her painful history. Her brother, Youssef, becomes a fighter, and her other brother, Ismael, is kidnapped as a baby and raised by an Israeli family under a different name, an event that really haunts the narrative. Spanning 4 generations, Mornings in Jenin is both a personal family saga and a poignant chronicle of the Palestine sufferings, resilience, and exile. It offers a heartbreaking perspective on a highly politicized conflict. I simply cried buckets while reading this book. Moving on, Shantaram by Gregory David Roberts. I have it here, and I've just finished reading it a couple of weeks ago. Shantaram is an epic, semi-autobiographical novel based on the author's own experiences as a fugitive. The story follows Lynn, an Australian man who escapes prison and flees to Bombay or Mumbai in the 1980s. In India, he builds a new life in the city slums, where he opens a makeshift health clinic. He gets involved in local underworld and forms deep connections with both Indians and fellow foreigners. He eventually becomes entangled in the Mumbai mafia, smuggling operations, and even joins a guerrilla group in Afghanistan. Shantaram is both a thrilling adventure and philosophical reflection on crime, life, forgiveness, and the search for meaning in a state of chaos. And also it paints a vivid, immersive portrait of India, beauty, poverty, balance, and spirituality. A lot of great reflections while reading this book. I loved it a lot, and I'll talk about it fairly soon. I read this book as a buddy read with my Italian channel, so I want to do a video there first, and then I'll add my thoughts here on Uncommon Reader too. Moving on to the next title, this is another great book that I read this year, The Most Secret Memory of Man by Mohamed Mbougar Sarr. The protagonist of this book is Jegan, a young Senegalese writer who discovers a legendary book titled The Labyrinth of Inhumanity. This title, it says it all. He becomes obsessed with this book and his author, who is also from Senegal. The author of this book, Eliman, disappears from the world after being accused of plagiarism with that infamous book. His reputation is destroyed by the critics after an initial success of the book. Jegan, obsessed with discovering the truth about Eliman's disappearance, embarks on a journey tracing the steps of Eliman through people who knew him, traveling through different countries and continents. It's a very adventurous book, but also philosophical, kind of similar to Shantaram, with totally different context and events. This book won the Goncourt Prize in 2021, and rightly so. It's an homage to literature, and Jegan's journey really made me feel like I was chasing the secret of life with him. Such brilliant prose as well. Loved it. Okay, could I not add Jack London in this list? Of course not. So I chose The Call of the Wild, but any book of his for me is a masterpiece. I chose this book because it represents London's great care and connection with nature and animals. He actually was one of the first animal activists in history, because he was campaigning against using animals in circuses. So, The Call of the Wild is a classic adventure novel about Buck, a large domesticated dog, who is stolen from his home in California and sold into the brutal life of the Alaskan sled dog during the Klondike Gold Rush. As Buck is thrust into the harsh wilderness, he learns to survive by tapping into his instinct and primal strength. Over time, he sheds his domesticated ways and becomes increasingly wild. Eventually, after enduring cruelty, loss, and hardship, Buck fully answers the call of the wild and joins a wolf pack, embracing his true nature. Powerful writing as usual. London has something animal about him, in my humble opinion, because his description of what could be in Buck's mind are so vivid and clearly relatable to how an animal could think at a given situation. Next book is The Life Before Us by Romain Gary. This is a touching and humanistic novel about loss, survival, and dignity. It is narrated by the voice of Momo, who is a witty and precocious young Arab boy living in the poor Paris neighborhood of Belleville. He is cared for by Madame Rosa, who is a Holocaust survivor and a former prostitute who now takes in the children of other sex workers. As Madame Rosa's health declines, Momo tries to make sense of the world around him: poverty, prejudice, aging, and the meaning of love. His unconventional but deeply tender relationship with Madame Rosa is at the heart of the novel. Life Before Us is a powerful, funny, and compassionate exploration of society's outcasts, told through the innocent yet wise eyes of a child. A curious fact about this book: so Romain Gary wrote this novel under a different name, the one of Émile Ajar. He wanted to prove a point, as later in his career, the critics were not really praising his latest works. And he had previously won the prestigious Goncourt Prize in 1956 with The Roots of Heaven, which I spoke about in a previous video. So he published this book under a different name. Well, this book won the Goncourt Prize in 1975, and there was a big scandal when the truth has been revealed, because the Goncourt Prize had the rule that an author could only win once, but he won it twice. The last book of my dozen is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, a gothic novel about Victor Frankenstein, a young scientist who creates a living being by assembling and animating dead body parts. However, Victor is horrified by his creation and abandons the creature, who feels rejected, isolated, and struggles to find acceptance and understanding in a cruel world. Feeling loneliness and anger, it eventually seeks revenge on Victor's by harming those he loves. Mary Shelley has to be on this list, not only because she wrote this novel when she was about 18 years old, but because it is so profound and filled with reflections. The themes of ambition and playing God in one hand, and on the other hand, the isolation and what it means to be rejected by society. Not to mention questions about science and responsibilities, which are all topics that are truly relevant today too. So there you have it. This is my dozen, although I left out so many authors that I would have loved to include, so maybe I'll do this in another couple of years. I will tag some booktuber friends in the info box, but by all means, if you want to join me in the comments area, which are your dozen to save in case of an apocalypse. I thank you for spending time with me today. And for supporting my channel, please don't forget to like this video if you did enjoy it and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you soon, and in the meantime, happy reading. Ciao!